rains all the time, except not in the last month here. It rains, and every time it rains, the water dissolves salts. All kinds of salts, not just sodium salts, but phosphorus salts, magnesium salts. And those salts get washed into the tributaries, into the rivers. Eventually, all water leads to the ocean. So if the world is billions of years old, the ocean should be more salty than it is now. Another one. How much sediment is in the ocean? If the world is 1 billion years old, the amount of erosion would be 1 billion years worth of erosion. But if you go to the bottom of the ocean, you look and find out how much sediment is, there's about 1,300 feet of sediment in the deepest parts of the ocean. That's a lot of sediment.
Yeah, but not billions of years.
But that's not billions of years of sediment. What shape are mountains? I mean, no matter, right, you're right. There are some hills or mountains that are rounded, but there are so many jagged mountains. Like you go to Western Canada, that's the part of the mountains I'm most familiar with, but even down the Rockies, all along the coast, what shape are they? If the world is billions of years old, what shape should those mountains be?
Rounded off.
These are just, so besides carbon dating, radiometric dating, besides that, there's all kinds of other lines of evidence that say, no, the Earth has to be young.
Well,
Has to be.
The thing you told us the other night about the sedimentary rock and
Yeah.
laying down, that was real. I mean, that was truth.
Yeah, 75% of the world is sedimentary rock.
I mean, that's
Formed
not a
by
theory.
water.
That's not a theory. That's fact.
That's a fact. Nobody can deny that. You take core samples from around the world, and pretty much everywhere you take a core sample, you're hitting sedimentary rock.
And then the theory about it being smooth, that's the theory, but it made
The theory of it being smooth?
made sense.
No, that's a fact. The
But
the
why
layers
is-
are smooth.
The theory of why it's that image from.
Well, you're right.
It's a theory, how it does.
It's a theory, but it's based on experiments. Like they'll do water experiments with rocks and substrates to see if after so much water action, if they stay smooth. And what they find is that there has to be very limited exposure to water movement in order to have the layers be as flat as they are. So, yeah, it's kind of like inferences based on this research. This is what we see. So, a theory, yeah. Hold it loosely.
But I didn't come in here to learn what you thought. But to me, you have told me things that I can take away.
Good. That's my dream. That's the dream of the night.
Sorry, what did she say?
She said that she's received some things here that she can take away. Some details, some information. So that's what I'm about.
Not an opinion.
Yeah, and if you hear me say an opinion, stop me. It doesn't matter what it's about, and ask me to back it up. Because the last thing I want to do is to make any
I haven't heard that.
pronouncements. Yeah.
Seems like the rain is fresh water and it will dilute the salt in the oceans
Yes.
more than the salt coming off the mountains into the oceans. I don't know.
I get that, and let's just think that through. So any water added to the oceans will be evaporated from the oceans. So that won't add or take away salt. But water flowing from the rivers can only add salt. So the amount of salt will build up. I love questions like that because you're thinking. And thinking, listen, if creationists would do some thinking, they'd be a lot less susceptible to just being told pronouncements.
Well,
Let's start. Yeah, go ahead.
the changes in the polar ice caps
Yeah.
fluctuate
Sure
the
can.
salinity of the ocean as well, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Right now, we're in a turn in Earth's history. You see, I'm about to step in a big thing, and I think I'm just going to pull my foot back and say, right now, the poles are shrinking. The ice is melting. That's all I'm going to say. But you can sort of tell I'm talking about global warming, and there's a whole lot we could say about global warming, but let's leave that for a whole nother series. Right now, what we're going to talk about tonight are theological considerations regarding our chosen worldview. Big title. What am I talking about tonight? I'm talking about the fact that if you choose to believe in God, that's going to affect, in a major sort of way, how you look at the world. Duh, right?
It does.
If you totally reject the concept that God exists and that he has anything to do with man, that's going to really affect the way you look at the world. Okay, so that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the theological consideration regarding choosing God or no God. I asked earlier, can you be a God believer, God follower, and be an evolutionist at the same time? I hope by the end of the evening you will know the answer to that question for yourself. All right, so let's go on. Shall we begin? What is science? We've been talking about science a bunch. There's a lot of research out there, government-funded research out there, that is not science. And there's a lot of argumentative research that's done out there that's not science. For me, it's like you have to wade through all these propaganda machines and all this cover-up machines. And I'm sorry it is here, but our world is a tough place to do research. Like when you're researching what somebody has experimented with and come out, it takes a lot of work to find out if they're just bluffing and pronouncing or whether they're really doing good science. To be good science, it has to be testable, repeatable, and falsifiable. In other words, if it's good science, then I should be able to come to my laboratory and test it. Otherwise, it's not science. So, I believe in God. Is that science? No, it's not science. It's not. It never can be. God's not going to come down and show up in a test tube so you can see if he's there. So we need to be very careful when we start talking about creation and evolution to test God. We need to stick with the evidence we have here, the tangible evidence. Repeatable? That makes sense, right?
Yeah.
You should be able to do it and get the same result time after time after time after time. If one time you get this result, one time you get that result, what do we call that? Inconclusive, right? Falsifiable. You have to be able to prove it wrong. If it can't be proven wrong, then no matter what experiment you do, you're going to get the right results. So that requires science. So when we think about things, when we hear of experiments done, we have to think in a scientific mind. Okay? The emotions have to be to the side. B is important. B is where so much of false information comes from. Okay, they must state clearly and honestly the assumptions on which the conclusions are based. If we don't know the assumptions, then we are dealing with information that we don't know how valid it is. Much of evolutionary science is done on the assumption that the world is a billion years old. Like our first lecture, remember? The Big Bang is a fact. If you base all your conclusions on something that is wrong, all your conclusions are wrong. So much is built on the formation of life in a primordial soup. That's an evolutionist really sticking their neck out, because they're basing all their speciation on something as unfounded, unproven, unrepeatable, unfalsifiable. We can't go back to the primordial soup and say, see, there's no creatures here. It's not science. What's my point? As a Christian, you'll often be accused of not being a good scientist. Oh, you God believers, you just trust the Bible. That's not scientific. But neither are they. so many evolutionary arguments are based on, what's the A word? Assumptions. That's what you have to go looking for. That's what you have to wade through. There are dyed-in-the-wool evolutionists out there who are doing dynamite research. They take their assumptions and they state them clearly. They back away from their emotions and their personal beliefs, and they do good science that's out there. Lots of it. There's others, often the most vocal around. The others are saying things that aren't even there. I put a little more humor in. I figured you guys appreciate this. Okay, so here is a chimpanzee, ape, Neanderthal, office worker. For the last time, stop following me. I'm a creationist. I thought you'd like that. So what is the theory of evolution? Okay, it's that after life started in some simple primordial form, it progressed over time in a purely naturalistic way. In other words, all by itself. To produce all the organisms we have on the earth, past and present. Okay, it all came from one-celled organism. Everything that's here. Evolution is defined as the gradual development of a living organism from simple to a complex form. And throughout the world, scientists, I say scientists, but not all scientists. There are so many creation scientists, solid, researching. They are upfront and honest scientists who do really good stuff. So I put scientists, but maybe I should just back that off and say evolutionary scientists agree unanimously that evolution is a fact of life. What's the word I have there that shouldn't be there? Fact. It's not a fact. Evolution is a theory. But it's treated as a fact. In textbooks, in presentations, on the internet, on YouTube, everywhere you go, everywhere our kids go, everywhere Christians go, they're taught, they're told, evolution is a fact, so catch up. Put that dusty old book away and get up with the times. And they say, you guys are like a bunch of non-scientific Neanderthals. They treat Christians as though we have nothing to say. And there is such good, solid, I've shown some of it to you, something to stand on. So an evolutionist will treat evolution as the fact of life in the context of adaptation, or some call it microevolution. See, they look and they see microevolution, and every creationist that's worth his salt will say, yes, microevolution is a fact. Variation, that's another way of saying it, or adaptation. That's where a creature adapts to its environment. You know, a mouse moves to the North Pole and he puts on gloves and a parka. You know, he's going to adapt. I'm kidding, I'm just seeing if you're awake and alive. We adapt, you adapt. Animals adapt. They figure out how to make their environment work for them, or they move, or they die. That's adaptation. You see, the evolutionists say, okay, if little changes are a possibility, or a fact, if little changes over a little bit of time are a fact, then, if we wait long enough, those little changes will add up to big changes. Creationists say, no. This is where we draw the line between creationists and evolutionists. So, creationary scientists identify the limitations on evolution at the family or species level. Okay? Kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. Do you remember that from biology? Okay, that's the levels. We're in the kingdom Animalia. Okay? We're Homo sapiens, but that's down here at the species level. This whole system was designed by Carl Linnaeus, and I may be getting ahead of myself, but just to identify who's alive. You know, all the creatures, he had to try and get them into some system. So That's the level that creationary science, I said it right, believe in. Microevolution. Okay? Everybody here comfortable with microevolution? It's adaptation. It's things like the snowshoe hare having what color hair in the winter?
White.
What color hair in the summer?
Brown.
Wow, that's an adaptation. Because the guys that didn't change to brown fur in the summer, they got 8. So everybody wised up and, put it in their computer to turn at the turn of the season. Evolutionary scientists will take this idea and expand it. Evolutionary scientists place no restrictions on evolution, meaning that given enough time, every life form that exists today came from one ancestor, macroevolution. One of the themes that evolution is dependent on is time. That's why everywhere an evolutionist looks, they try to find lots of time. The fossil record took billions of years. The cooling of the planets, billions of years. The fossils are billions of years old. Everything needs to be long in order to provide time for evolution. So if you come along and you give reason or information that points to a young Earth, you're striking at the very base of the tree. And if we can show that the Earth is young, that's going to seriously impact the theory of evolution. And we were just talking about some of the things that say, wait a second, the Earth is not 50 or 4.9 billion years old. It's just not. And here's why. Which one is evolutionary? Well, evolutionary says we start with a amoeba, and we, over time, get all the way up to man. Creation says you start with a man, but over time that man may look a little different. Look at the variety of people in our world today. Okay, how many men went on the ark? How many kinds of men went on the ark? You're right, 4. Noah and his 3 sons. The likelihood is they looked pretty similar. But look at the variety we have today. Dogs. Well, I had a picture. I don't know if you saw it when I skipped past it. How many different kinds of dogs are they today? Did you know you can take all the genetics of all those dogs and you'll find all of those options in one animal called the American wolf? When that American wolf became all those other kinds of dogs, it was with small micro changes, a lot of selective breeding. And you'll notice that once you get a purebred dog, they're not nearly as robust and healthy as the mutt, who has more breath in their genetics. That makes sense, right? Okay, so bird, still a bird. Lizard, lizard. Toad, toad. Fish, fish. Amoeba, amoeba. I mean, we have, can I just say this here twice? We have no laboratory evidence of any creature becoming a different kind of creature. We can zap them, we can mutate them, we can poke them, we can fry them, we can stir them up and put them back together, and we always come out with the same species. You would think, if evolution is a fact, you'd think that in a laboratory we'd be able to speed things up, and it wouldn't take billions of years to go from one to a different. We would be able to do it in short time. But you know what's missing? You know what fights against evolution the most? Silence. The silence of no transitionary forms. The silence of no laboratory evidence of evolution taking place. We can do microevolution. It's done all over the place, and the evolutionists say, see? And we say, no. Microevolution, we have no argument with that. There's a lack of evidence for the other. Over here, you'll see this is kind of the idea for macroevolution. You start with the amoeba, and everything comes from that amoeba. A creationist doesn't say that. Now, look up here. This is a tree. It's a tree. It starts with a dog, and it ends with a bunch of dogs. Microevolution. You put a horse here, What goes up the tree? Horses. You put a pansy there. What? Even something like a pansy. You put it at the bottom, what do you get on the top? Pansies. That's all it's ever been. No scientific research has ever been able to do anything else. So this acceptance of evolution. The question is, why were the theories of evolution accepted? It's because it's good science, right? No. If you go back to 1840, when evolution was first presented, people were in a mindset that they were ready for change. If you study about the social setting, if you study about what was going on in the world at that time, you find that people were just hungry for change. It's the beginning of the what revolution? Industrial revolution. Everything, it seemed, was turning on its head. Possibilities were endless. It was a time people were looking for change in lots of areas of their life. It was a time when church atrocities had really been highlighted. The world had seen what the church, a direct representative of God, had been doing and had done. And people were done with the church. They were done with being controlled by the church. By the way, the church was not representing God well, was it? Not at all. But you see, Satan uses whatever he can. He can use a poorly behaving Christian as his greatest presentation. Number 3, scientists wanted freedom. Where was the science done before 1844? In the churches. Remember Gregor Mendel? He was a monk. They were the scientists of the day, but they were under a certain amount of... Can you think of any scientist who was right but got killed because of what he said? He was saying, no, the earth is not the center of the universe. The sun is. And he got killed because he was saying something that the church thought the Bible said. The Bible does not say the earth is the center of the solar system. But the church thought it did. And they killed Galileo for going. And so this whole system, this made for a very ripe, fertile ground for evolution to be taken in as an opportunity to escape the church's control, escape God's atrocities, and go somewhere new. Why did they continue to be accepted? Now, this is another matter. We live in a totally different world. But now, today, researchers don't want to be ostracized by the scientific community and lose their research money. I know of at least 5 very good scientists who were doing research, and in their scientific research, they came up with something that went directly against the evolutionary propaganda. One of them wrote a book called Creation's Tiny Mysteries. He was looking at the radio halos in mica. Really quick.
What was the book?
The book Creation's Tiny Mystery. He was researching that there are radioactive elements that when a rock is being formed, they will be emanated from it. Neutrons escape. Okay? And he did this research, and when he was doing the research and using the evolutionary mindset, by the time the rock cooled, billions of years, those neutrons should be long gone. So there will be no radio halos. But everywhere he looked, he got granite from here, granite from there. Granite has mica in it, so he would pull that mica off and stick it under a microscope, and he found radio halos all over the place. Radio halos that shouldn't exist. Because if the rocks cooled slowly, like evolution says, remember planetesimals adding more and more dust to them until they're fine. If it cools slowly, by the time the rock cools and forms a solid sheet of mica, crystallizes, the neutrons are long gone and there'd be nothing to leave the halo. But what he found is the granites of Earth have halos, meaning that they had to be made in an instant. They had to be created it's like okay, so if a ball, like you're at the ballpark and someone hits a home run and the ball is going past us and you take a snapshot, you have to get it while the ball's in the frame, right? So if a rock cools slowly, it would be like the ball is going past, the ball is long gone, the ball is long gone, and then you hit to take the picture. Are you going to catch the ball? No. But if the rocks were made instantaneously, then the ball's going plastic, you've got the ball right in the center. He was completely kicked out of scientific circles, was not allowed to publish, was not allowed to come to geology conferences. He was ostracized. So many scientists, for the sake of their research and for the sake of their reputation and their, tenure, they keep their mouths shut. The general public has not given all the facts. That's why evolution is so big in the world. Science teachers in high school, they're not thinking and they're not teaching what they've thought through, they're just repeating. People who have the most to say about evolution have the least knowledge. I'm just certain of it because it has got so many holes in the theory. Any other theory that had the holes in it that evolution does is dropped. It is taught as fact and people do not question it. This is what the problem is in our society. So there you go. That's how we evolved, right? There really should be one more and it will look like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got a question.
Yes.
Quote, if there was such thing as true evolution, and speaking as far as living matter, wouldn't one species when it was evolving, what it started from would die out?
Okay, that's a really good question. Let me go back here to this. Evolutionary science does believe that this will turn into these, but only some of these will turn into those. The rest will continue being amoebas. So, like when you see the splitting of the tree, the original, some of them will continue to be themselves, but there'll be a few that walk out of the water and turn into a lizard. Okay, so that's a very good question. Yeah?
And what do they think supposedly makes those few that do that? Like, what's their answer for
Well, they're
that?
trying to get to Taco Bell.
Yeah, and also, why don't they keep evolving? Like, how come they stopped?
Yeah,
Like,
that's
where's
okay.
the evolving that
Because
keeps going?
evolutionary thought here is because they have done enough evolving to be successful in their niche. They don't need to keep evolving.
Got an answer for everything, don't they?
Yeah, yeah.
So it actually takes more faith to believe in evolution than it does.
I believe that's the case.
Yeah, really.
I believe that's the case. Okay, so let's talk about natural selection. I just want to set you up for a discussion as we go along. Natural selection is the selection of the best fit. So in a given environment where there's only so much food, the one that's going to be able to get the food the best, he's going to live and have more babies than the ones who can't compete. Okay, it's the Olympic Games of science. The one who gets the gold has more children. So after a while, the population looks more like the guy who got the gold.
But that goes for plants too. I mean,
Absolutely.
every living creature,
Yeah,
their whole is procreation. I mean, that's their whole purpose.
exactly.
Create the next generation.
And that's something that God built in to a given species, the ability to do variety,
Right.
so that if it's drought, this plant can live
Right.
and keep the species going. If it's heavy rains, then one of the kids, or one of the seeds,
Sure.
who has shallower roots is able to make it because they can live in wetter soil.
Right.
So that's variety that I believe God put in all the natural animals. Okay, so let's go on with survival of the fittest. Basically, variety is voted on. You've got offspring of various traits, and the environment picks the one that best fits it, and that one stays alive, procreates. The other ones die out. That's the pressure of the environment selecting for what can live there. Okay? The variation that gives adaptive advantage will be selected. Okay? So the bottom line is the environment will kill all the organisms that are least able to survive. This is natural selection. This is evolution. No, it's not. This is normal, everyday, tooth and claw where we live. It's what selects who lives, but it doesn't cause evolution. And no squirrel says, okay, there's not going to be any nuts this year, so I'm going to have to learn how to eat seeds. No squirrel can think. No genes can think, okay, there's a whole new kind of bacteria coming out here. We better learn to defend against it. The genes don't work that way. Natural selection picks out after the fact. And you can't change yourself. You can't all of a sudden decide one day, okay, I'm going to be this way. Well, humans, we can sort of, but a squirrel can't. A squirrel can't wake up and say, hey, you know what? I really need to have flippers. Because there's a lot of water on the forest floor, and all of a sudden the little squirrel gets, ooh, I've got, what do you call it, webs between my toes. How cool is that? No, that's not how it works.
Or he just goes to Walmart.
Goes to Walmart and gets some flippers. No, natural selection can't create. Look at this. Natural selection does not originate or create anything. It only chooses the best life form that exists to make and makes more of them. Natural selection may explain the survival of the fittest, but it does not explain the arrival of the fittest. Okay? The arrival is totally based on genetics. The genetics is all what the squirrel receives as inheritance from its parents. So here's the problem with evolution. You're asking evolution to have brains. And it doesn't. It just produces a bunch of variety, and then the environment picks out the one who's best able to live. Does that make sense? Okay, so that means that evolution is blind. Evolution doesn't think, okay, we're going to need people with 5 fingers on their hands. Evolution doesn't think, okay, we need to start developing gills here because this new creature is going to have to live in water world. Evolution doesn't think. There's no such thing as a brain in evolution. All there is variety. And that variety is limited to the genetics of the parent. So this doesn't create any new DNA. Just think this through. If no DNA is created in the process of evolution, then evolution can't work. Because all you'll ever get is what you already have. Maybe that was a crazy thing. Let me give you an idea here. Which guy is right?
Both of them.
That's an interesting word, perspective, isn't it? The guy who's on the island, he has been waiting and looking for a boat. A boat! The guy in the boat has been looking for
Land.
land. So they're both right from their perspective. When I talked at the beginning about a worldview, that's the perspective. The guy in the island, his worldview is, I'm stuck here. I need to find a way off. I need to get out of here. That's his worldview. The guy in the boat, his worldview is, I'm floating around. I need some solid to stand on. So they look for what the other one has. Which one is saved? No, the guy in the island, he's a Christian. No, I'm kidding. Our perspective totally impacts what we see. They both see salvation in what's coming towards them.
Right.
So our worldview is really important. You see, the theory of evolution has a mindset where evolutionists will collect not just fossils, but any bit of information, and they'll arrange it based on something that appears to show evolutionary progress over time. Have you ever seen those pictures of little tiny horse, and then a bigger horse, and then a bigger horse, and then a bigger horse, and a bigger horse, and a bigger horse, and wow, we have the Clydesdales of today? No, that doesn't cut it. Because the little horse was in Papua New Guinea, and the medium-sized horse was in Africa, and the other horse had two toes. How many toes do horses have?
Hoofs.
They just have a hoof, one. And they put them in order based on their size when they never even existed in the same part of the world. And that doesn't cut it. You can't have a horse evolving in Papua New Guinea that then swims to Africa and keeps evolving and then swims. Sorry. But see, this tells you a mindset of there's a certain dishonesty here where we just so want evolutionary progress to be demonstrated in the fossils that we organize the fossils in such a way that they prove what we want them to. This is interesting. Genetic mapping has been used to organize all the creatures in Earth. And sometimes it's a little different than what the original trees were like. So even though we're phenotypically outside similar to an organism, we might be genotypically unrelated to them. And so the modern genetic testing has been used to try and prove evolution. But you know what? They don't want to admit it, but it hasn't worked. They thought they were set, that they would be able to prove that the organisms changed genetically over time and there were just transitionary forms in the DNA. But they found that a gene either works or it don't. Like you can't have half a gene. Does that make sense? It's like it just doesn't work, and so the organism dies. The lack of transitionary forms exists both genetically and in the large creature. The truth is that there are gaps between organisms that challenge the scientists to explain how these gaps were spanned. Okay, I'm going to play dumb. You say that this creature turned into this creature. Explain that to me. Well, little changes. Okay, so what little changes? There's no answer to that because they have no evidence. They can't say, well, first the beak got a little bit longer, and then, no, they can't go through like that because there's nothing to fill in the gap. Why is there nothing to fill in the gap? Because nothing ever filled that gap. Neither geology nor genetics provides a finely graduated chain of ancestors and descendants. It's just not there.
So it goes back to assumption.
It goes back to an assumption and a mindset of what they want to find, and they're so dedicated. Most of the mammals, the number of bones, the arrangements of the bones. So an evolutionist sees that and says, see, common ancestor. We have many of the very same molecules, life molecules. We make a lot of the same proteins. We have the exact same DNA. We have so much similarity. So an evolutionist will see common ancestor. We think. What does a creationist think? What does a Christian think? Well, creationists see similarity in morphology and genetics as evidence of a common designer. Just like Lego world is all made out of Legos, living organisms are all made out of biomolecules. I mean, picture God in his laboratory. I don't know if he had one, or if he did any R&D, but I picture him in his laboratory with all these elements, buckets of them, and he's pouring them together and mixing them up, and he's building living creatures. And once he's built a really good pumping heart, he uses it in a lot of different creatures. See, to me that makes sense. It just makes sense that God would do that type of a design. Here's here you are, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. You get more and more specific. The animals get more and more similar. Look at all the creatures in this out here in the Animalia. Many of them have much the same designs in different arrangements, different colors, different lengths. We all have tails. Humans have tails. Anybody here agree with me? It's just very, very short. And very, very important. I mean, we don't have a prehensile tail that we can hang from, but we do have a few bones on the end of our coccyx that are very important for closing off the end of our spinal cord. And for the cute muscles back there that help us to walk. They're attached to our coccyx. We need that tail. But that tail had nothing to do with a monkey's tail, or a cow's tail, or an elephant's tail, or a rabbit's tail. Look at all the different tails in the world. Each one of them designed for the creature as the creature needs it. So when we think of our paradigm, if we start off with our paradigm being there is no God, that puts us in a pickle. If there's no God, how do we explain all that's around us? Where did this come from? Why am I here? Where am I going? Those are important questions, questions that all humans want to answer. If you take away God, you take away the Creator, you take away the flood, you have left over just naturalistic evolution. The impact is big. Now, if you have God, you have the concept of sin. And you know what? That makes our world a lot of sense in our world. You have the flood. You have degeneration. That's why our teeth don't fit in our mouths. See, an evolutionist says, we have evolved, but our teeth haven't caught up. How many people have to have their wisdom teeth taken out because our mouths are smaller than Neanderthal, right? We, as Christians, have the concept of degeneration. All of Earth groans, right? And that makes sense. We also have rescue. Second coming of Jesus. And we also have restoration. Eternal life with Him. And I'm telling you, we are so rich. Gap theory, theistic evolution, progressive creation. These are three in the middle ground. These guys know God. Those guys, God did it all. And continues and will do it all. In here, we have a group of people that try to blend the two of them together. And that's what we're going to look at next. So I want you to look at that picture. Wow, I must have jumped. Sorry. My numbers are not adding up. Okay, so here we have just a visual of what I just showed you. If you're a creationist, he looks at a skull, that's the input, and he thinks, wow, that's great evidence for creation. Look at that magnificent skull. Look at the design. Look at how it all works together, the hinge and the muscles and the eyeballs. Wow, this is so cool. Now, someone who rejects God, a Darwinist or an evolutionist says, oh, look at that. That is excellent evidence for evolution. So our creation versus evolution mindset will determine what we see. Okay, I told you I was going to give you some lines of evidence of why the earth has to be young. Young meaning 4 to 10,000 years. Me, I stick with 6. I'm hopelessly going to follow what the Bible says. That's me. I've just kind of simplified my life, and I just believe, if the Bible says it, I believe it. Where do I get 6,000 years from the Bible? Well, in the genealogies. Genealogies, they're kind of tough to figure out, but it's generally agreed about 6,000 years. 2,000 years, flood, 4,000 years.
But the arrowheads were 10,000 years old, but they were carbon dated.
So let's take a look at this. Lines of evidence for a young Earth, the sediments in the ocean. The amount of sediment on the seafloor, approximately 1,300 feet, does not match predictions based on the theory of uniformity of billions of years of deposition. So we can measure how much sediment is being deposited every year, and then we can we can multiply that by how many years they say the world has been around, and the sediments on the floor of the ocean should be about 5 times as much. Just is. Okay? Using the flood hypothesis, though, okay, think about the sediments that were created during the flood. The Earth would be about, in the thousands of years, and it's completely adequate. 1,300 feet with the flood mentality, about 4,000 years, about 6,000 years, sorry. So, I'm not going to get into proving that. I'm just going to say that it's not billions of years old. Can't be. Doesn't work out. Here's another one. Bent or folded rock layers found. Okay, now it's making sense. Here. These are the sediments. You can go down and do cores down below the water, and there's the sediments. So the scientists have done it. They know how much sediment is there. They've done a number of core studies. There's places where there are huge warehouses full of nothing but sediment cores. Okay, so they've done the science, and they know, there's only 1,300 feet of sediments. And all the evolutionary scientists go, that's not enough. It's one data point that says evolution, billions of years, So here's the next one. Bent or folded rock layers are found worldwide. Worldwide. Everywhere you go, you'll find rocks that are bent and crisscrossed and twisted. And remember, that can only happen if the layers are pliable plastic. Excellent. Okay? Once they're hardened, they will shatter. They will not bend. Okay, look at this one. Isn't that amazing? You look at something like that, it's kind of beautiful.
They're
But
beautiful.
it screams flood. Okay? It's highly unlikely that a sequence that is many millions of years old could remain pliable to bend without fracture. How do you bend that after it's solid? Can't. Just can't. A time constraint requires that the layers had to harden fast enough to fossilize the creatures in them, but slow enough to be pliable. And the only way you can do that is with the flood scenario, where the layers are made and the fossils are made at the same time, bent, and then hardened. It just works that way. Here's another one. Unfossilized soft tissue. I was looking for this picture earlier. It's not a very good picture at all. But those are chondrocytes. Those are cartilage-producing cells from a dinosaur's bones. Can you see anything that makes you realize it's a cell? What do you see in the middle of it? Nucleus. There's even organelles. There's even dendrites that go out. This is a creature of a cell that can crawl through your bones. You've got them all over you, crawling in your bones. Cool stuff. That's in a dinosaur that is supposed to be millions of years old. Now, right now, you've got a bunch of them in you. But if we were to bury you and dig you up in 10 years, if you weren't put in a very specific place, they wouldn't be there. They'd die, dissolve, and be gone. For them to be in a dinosaur that's millions of years old, that just trips the scientists out. Because everyone agrees that they should not be there. Not after millions of years. Here's another one. Faint sun paradox. Okay, this gets into a little bit of astrophysics. Okay, the sun is currently getting hotter over time as the helium builds up in the sun's core. Okay, this is scientific. I'm not one of those scientists, but from what I read, it seems legit. Okay, so the sun is burning hotter and hotter. It's interesting when you read Revelation. There's something in there about that. This means that if we dial back the clock, the sun should get cooler, right? If we back up time using the theory of uniformitarianism, which is an evolutionary truth, 3.5 billion years ago, the sun would have been far too cool to keep water liquid on planet Earth. So those primordial ponds would have been skating rinks.
The plants wouldn't be alive or anything.
Makes sense.
So you can't have it both ways. And that's what needs to be said to the evolutionists. You can't have it both ways. Either you dump uniformitarianism or you own up that this just can't happen. All right, rapidly decaying magnetic field. Did you know the magnetic field on Earth is decaying? Your compasses don't work nearly as well as they did in the past. In fact, the poles have even switched back and forth. But there's a bigger problem with the magnetic field decreasing. Right now, if you go to the north or the south, and at certain times when a lot of solar radiation is coming, the magnetic field will deflect that solar radiation, and you'll see it as the aurora borealis or australis. Okay? When the magnetic field gets weaker, guess what? Those rays don't get reflected, they get through. Okay? So as the magnetic field that protects the Earth from the solar radiation decreases in strength 5% per century. Okay. It doesn't seem like that's a big thing, but this is one of our Goldilocks zone issues. Goldilocks zones. This is why you have to think Earth had to be created, because it's in the only space as far as distance from the sun, as far as distance to the moon, size of the moon. There's so many constraints. Earth is in the Goldilocks zone. This is one of those that if it changes significantly enough, life stops on planet Earth. The current rate of decline, the Earth has to be less than 20,000 years old. Again, we're taking their theory, uniformitarianism, and we're just saying, okay, well, if it decreases in strength 5% every century, so we do the math, we say Earth has to be less than 20,000 years old, otherwise the magnetic field would be so strong life couldn't exist. No radiation could get through. We'd be in a dead planet. You see what I'm saying? As we just take their information. Here's another one. Presence of helium in radioactive rock. Helium. What do you know about helium? The inert gas. What happens if you fill a little latex container full of helium and let it go? So it's lighter than the oxygen and nitrogen of our air, carbon dioxide. So what happens is when helium is produced, it takes off and it goes out of here. Just like if you took an air balloon and put it at the bottom of the ocean and let it go, where would it go? Right up and out of here. So you just have to think of helium is going to escape. So here's the thing. It rapidly leaks out of radioactive rocks. Helium does. It's one of the byproducts. Okay, as the neutrons move around and try to emanate, helium comes out as well. If the Earth is more than 100,000 years old, all the helium should be gone. Based on present rates of helium production, all the helium should be long gone. But it's not. It's not. Interesting, if the rocks were assessed according to the helium in them, their age tends to be around 6,000 years. It's just one of those interesting things. Okay, which piece of Sprite is the oldest? B. Yeah. This is the helium thing. If the Earth is more than 100,000 years old, it's going to have most of its helium is going to be long gone, like the carbonation in soda. But this is what we find in the world. So the soda must have been put out much later than they say. I mean, we know that helium takes off, right? Okay, what about the presence of helium in the atmosphere? The atmosphere contains less helium than expected. Okay, so it escapes from the rocks. It has to go somewhere. So if all the helium has been escaping from the rocks, the atmosphere should be full of helium. It's not. It's just not. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. You have to do science and be honest. The problem is they're not. Okay, carbon-14. That is a carbon molecule with 2 extra neutrons. Very unstable. Half-life is 5,730 years. That's how long it takes to get rid of half of the carbon-14 out of something. just 5,300, I think it's 5,370. Yeah, 5,730. Okay, so if the Earth is billions of years old, how much carbon-14 should be in the rocks?
None.
It should be long gone. In 5,730 years, half of it is gone. So in 11,460 years, you have a quarter of what you started with. So you can see quickly that in 10,000 years, all the carbon-14 is going to be decomposed into carbon-12. But when you look at the rocks, guess what? In fossils, even those believed to be the most ancient, hundreds of millions of years, carbon-14 is still present. Diamonds have carbon-14 in them. They shouldn't. Carbon-14 should be long gone if they're that old. But it's not. You see, I want you to understand that we've gone through just 8 of the ways that Earth has to be young. Can't be old. If, as the evidence suggests, Earth's magnetosphere was stronger in the past, less carbon-14 would have been produced back then. That's even more reason that there shouldn't be any carbon-14 left in diamonds and coal. It should be long gone. But it's not. It's not. How about comets? What happens to comets? They take a trip around the sun, right? Last one to go past was Halley's Comet. That's right. It's been around about, I'm trying to think. I think I have it here. No, maybe not.
42 million years. No.
In my head, I think it's around 15 times Halley's Comet has circled the sun. But here's the thing. Every trip around the sun releases a massive comet, and they should all be gone from the universe in 12 billion years. By 12 billion years, there should be no more comets. They should have all melted. But there's still comets out there. Relatively little salt in the ocean. We already talked about that. It should be a lot more. If this planet is billions of years old, there should be a lot more. How about DNA recovered from ancient bacteria? They found salt crystals with bacteria in it. They pulled out the DNA and were able to bring the bacteria back to life. And they said that this bacteria was, does it say here? 250 million years old. They dated it with their methods and said, this is 250 million years old. 250 million years old, and you're able to bring it back to life? It's called Lazarus bacteria.
Seriously.
Evolutionists agree that even a spore bacterial DNA could never last beyond, that should be, 1 million years. Wow. Oh, here's the kicker. DNA very similar to modern bacteria, despite the 250 million years of evolution. So the bacteria from the salt crystal, 250 million years old, and the bacteria growing in the lab next door, oh, these are identical.
Oh, they've evolved.
That pushes it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
What I want you to understand, and I know you don't have all the scientific studies behind you or in front of you or to take home. Sorry, that would be a real gift, wouldn't it? But just understand there is good science out there that says, no, the Earth is not that old. And I haven't even talked about meteor dust, erosion of the mountains, coral reef growth. You can go and look at corals and see how long they've grown, and they haven't been growing for millions of years. Peat bog depth. If millions of years, there should be a huge peat bog depth, but there isn't. River delta growth. I mean, Mississippi runs for 1 billion years. You should have some major delta going down into the Gulf. Niagara Falls shouldn't exist anymore. It started downstream, and every year it erodes and falls off. The face does. Okay? And it's moving back up towards Lake Erie. If the Earth is billions of years old, Niagara Falls should be at Lake Erie. But it's not. The Earth can't be that old. The evidence just doesn't back it up. How you doing out there? This is another good one, okay? So the husband's in at the TV. No way! That is such a bad call. He did that on purpose. That's no accident. You're not even close. Too long! And the lady says, I didn't know your husband was into sports. And the wife says, he's not. This is what happens when creationists watch National Geographic TV specials. Do you talk back to the TV? You know, when it says this bug is 55 billion years old, I'm like, you are just so wrong about that. Yeah, David Attenborough. Sometimes I want to choke him and punch him in the throat. You know, that's just my view. You see, if you're going to hold on to this idea of uniformitarianism and long ages, it's going to put you in a serious conflict between the current rates and the results, what the results, if it's billions of years, should be. Okay. I didn't do that. It's not my fault. Okay, I see what we're doing. I forget sometimes what's coming next. So, who holds the authority? Evolutionary science or the Bible? To the world, what's the answer?
The world is
Evolutionary science. So what happens when you bring the Bible to a discussion or a debate?
Takes a bunch of stories and fairy tales.
There's a song on the radio right now. And one of the lines is, David brought a rock to a sword fight.
Yeah.
I love that line.
It's great, right?
Because who won?
David.
Yeah. You cannot trust the world's ways compared to God's ways. So the evolutionary says that thorns existed for millions of years before man. Right? Evolution. The Bible says that thorns are a result of the choice of man to sin. That's Genesis 3:17. It's part of the curse. The evolutionist says disease is evident in the fossil record and predates man. The Bible says that everything was very good when man was made. The evolutionist says defense attack strategies, tooth and claw, predation existed millions of years before man. That would be evil. The basic idea is that evil existed before humans. God, the Bible says that men and animals were all vegetarians before sin. The evolutionist says death has been a part of the world from the very beginning. The Bible says that man's sin led to death as a consequence. So who's true? You know, one of the evidences that I like to think about, and this is just an example, there is just so much. Humans' design tends to be over and above what is needed. Think robots. The first hands on a robot were just a couple of pincers. And it was more than adequate for what the robot needed. But God didn't give us pincers. We're not like lobsters. He gave us this incredible design. How long have engineers been designing robotic hands? For a long time. Would you be interested to see what they came up with? The best scientists, the best equipment, the best materials. They put it all together, and guess what they came up with? What does that remind you of? Where do you think they got that idea? Isn't it interesting? Now, they could have come up with 2 fingers. They could have come up with 2 hands. They could have come up with suction cups. But what did they come up with? They come up with something that is identical, even down to 4 fingers and a thumb. And it's not because they wanted it to be something they could stick some plastic skin on and look like a normal human hand. They designed this because this was the best design they could come up with. That should tell you something. When humans were designed, it was just something that God wanted to put together. Do you know that our facial expressions, it's just amazing, the detail of what we can do with our face. Sometimes it's kind of fun. You get a mirror and you just can, like Mr. Bean. Have you ever watched any of his? He gets into a mirror and he does all kinds of things. I've never done that in my life.
Right.
25 human facial muscles, and those 25 can make 10,000 facial expressions. Our hand dexterity exceeds survival. The human design is above and beyond. It is amazing. And then you come to our brain, which is able to think and communicate complex thoughts. Just think what we're doing here. It's remarkable. Put this many cats in a room and I guarantee you they would be communicating, but not like we are. We have a higher sense of right and wrong. Our creativeness and enjoyment of the beauty of flowers, architecture, culture, music. We are remarkable creatures. And to think that we're just smart monkeys, that goes against logic. We may share a lot of similar build, but when it comes to our brains, we're in a class all by ourselves. I want to talk about some origin theories, and I'm going to go through these quick. And the reason is because all these theories are gradations of what the Bible teaches. And I want to get to what the Bible teaches. Can someone close that back door for us, just to cut down the noise? Okay, so theistic evolution. It sounded like such a good idea. There's so much, grain of salt here, there's so much evidence for evolution. God must have used it to make man. That's the logic of theistic evolution. God designed everything to create itself. So God got the ball rolling, and like a bunch of dominoes, everything fell into place until bloop, out comes Adam and Eve. What's the problem with that? What's the problem with that idea? How God literally is directing evolution to make Adam. Well, the difficulty is that, number one, that's not what the Bible says. You'd think if that's what happened, that's what Moses would have written into Genesis. The problem with this is that you have death and evil used by the Creator God who is love. And then when Adam comes along, he changes the philosophy of everything and expects Adam to be good. And when he does wrong, he gets kicked out of the garden. That doesn't jive, does it? It doesn't make sense. So you've got to be very careful in just accepting these type of theories. Let's go down. Let's look at the gap theory. It's the second one. Basically, this idea is that God created the heavens and the earth. Billions of years goes by. The rocks get old. Okay? And then God comes back and creates. And you see, what that does is it gives Earth the appearance of being very old, fits in with the billions of years, before God did his work in Genesis 1, verse 2. Well, it seems like a good idea, doesn't it? Because it makes peace with some evolutionary thoughts, but the Bible doesn't put a comma there. It just doesn't. The structure of the days, you can't have a break and then say the evening and the morning were the first day. It doesn't work that way. This gap, the focus of this gap is to make peace with science. And that puts you on very dangerous ground when you're trying to have the Bible make peace with science. The Bible needs to stand alone. Stand alone. Okay, here's another one. It's called the day-age theory. See, the gap is, okay, the Bible starts, there's a gap, then we go on. The day-age theory basically says the days weren't 24-hour days. They were long periods of time. You know, the Bible says a day with the Lord is like a 1,000 years, and 1,000 years like a day. No. If you go back and you study Genesis 1, it says the evening and the morning were the first
day.
Yom. Yom is the Hebrew word. Evening and the morning were the second day. Yom. Yom is a 24-hour day. has a night part and a day part. In Jewish thought, all the way back through Moses, all the way back to creation. You have the evening part of the day, then the light part of the day. And you start and finish evening to evening. That's a 24-hour period. Anytime Yom is used with a number, it always means 24-hour day. There are some places where it refers to something else, but then there's no numerical number with it. Just something I learned from a Jewish rabbi. Okay? So here's your day age theory in 6 days or 6 billion years. No. 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 Not going to work. Okay, I've got to catch up here. Progressive creationism. Okay, so progressive creationism is where God starts evolution. That's what this theory teaches. And then intervenes now and then to create over millions of years. So the Big Bang happened 13 to 15 billion years ago. Days of creation were a series of overlapping millions or billions of years. It's just God using death, bloodshed, and disease. Long before Adam and Eve exist, and then when Adam and Eve show up, he gives them a spirit. They became living, thinking beings, and we go on from there. It's an attempt to take evolution and creationism and just mix them in a hat, throw them up, and let them land and have them interact. It doesn't follow what the Bible says. It's just, it leaves Adam and Eve with no spirit, but made in the image of God, and then they're given a spirit, and then they sin. When you study the Bible, there's something that's really important. You look for the simplest explanation. Sorry. Here's a visual of it. So you have all these millions of years of death, suffering, and disease, and then God plants the Garden of Eden with Adam and Eve on top of it all. So here's your geologic column, created billions of years before Adam and Eve are even on the scene. This is trying to explain the geologic column without taking the flood into account. So, what about the next two? Apparent age theory. I'm not even sure I need to go through these. These are all just ways of trying to make evolution and creationism blend. So, apparent age, God created a mature universe. He made old rocks. Okay. Punctuated 24-hour theory. Millions of years are squeezed between the days of the creation week. So you have the first day, and then you have a million years, and then the second day, and a million years. It's a lot like the gap theory. I'm going to catch my computer up. I have so many details. I'm a guy who just digs in so many details, but sometimes it's overwhelming. Right? Tom's shaking his head. Okay, so creationist theories. When we think of progressive creation, the question is not, could God use evolution? Could God use evolution? He could. But the more important question is, would God use evolution? Would he use death and destruction, suffering, animals dying? Would he do that? That doesn't fit with his character. When you think about evolution, it's almost an opposite of God. It's not a loving process where if you don't cut it, you're killed. Can you picture God in his laboratory trying to figure these processes out? It just puts God in a... It takes God off his throne and puts him down here with the rest of us. Scientific creationism. It's a group of people who aren't wanting to land in any camp. They're just looking for information. They come up with some really powerful stuff, but they don't draw any conclusions. They just kind of give you the facts of what they found out, and you make your own decision. I respect that group. Absolutely respect them. Okay, how about this one? Young Earth creationism. The universe and Earth were created less than 10,000 years ago. There's a lot of blends here. Like if you were to ask me where I fit, I probably have some of this, and some of this, and a whole lot of that. Okay? Intelligent design is basically saying, hey, listen, this stuff didn't just show up on its own. It just didn't. There's a bacterial flagellum. How many pieces? Oh, there's a bunch. It's like an electric outboard motor. It's got a stator, it's got cups, it's got rings, it's got bearings, it's got a hook joint, it's got a propeller. That can't just happen. If you have everything but the propeller, well, how would it do for you if you're out in the lake and you put down your motor, the propeller falls off? You're not getting back to shore. Doesn't matter how hard you rev that engine. This is not going to last in a cell unless it works. Intelligent design says many of the biological systems that evolution could not have accounted for their development. They had to be created. Like the cell. When I was telling you about the cell, it is so complex. You have to have a complicated cell for it to survive. It cannot survive if it doesn't have a pump and organelles and a nucleus and DNA and RNA and ribosomes and nucleic acids, and the list continues to go on. It won't make it without all of that. The point to this, as evidence for some sort of intervention at some point in history, they're saying, someone made this place. Someone made me. They're not going so far as saying God did it. They're just saying someone made this. And I think they have a fantastic point. Okay, down to framework hypothesis. This is where it gets fun. Genesis is theological, not practical. In other words, yeah, it's a nice story, but it's not science. And it's not really how things went. It's just a story. Well, how about this one? Historical creationism. Oh, I missed that one. Oh, it must be over here. Historical creationism. The universe was already very old when God showed up. God showed up to an old planet. Corner of space he built billions of years ago. And it was time, so he came down to the planet to create Earth as the account reads in Genesis 1 and 2. You know what? That's possible, isn't it? In the beginning, God made, the heavens and the earth. And then it goes on with the story. So it doesn't seem like he came, left, and came back. At least that's not in the story. This theory teaches that the 7-day creation was a remodel of a very old planet. Okay, so why am I sharing all those with you? Just to help you to understand there's a theory for every flavor. It's like Baskin Robbins. Okay, you can pick through the list. But I want to spend the remaining part of our time, I want to do something maybe a little novel, okay? Before we decide what Genesis 1 to 2:4 means, maybe we should check in with the Bible and see how the Bible interprets Genesis 1 to 2:4. You know, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. Have you read through Genesis 1 and 2? Okay, so we've been there, but what does the rest of the Bible have to say? Let's take a look. I told you I was going to show you a list of verses that directly reference creation or the flood. Now there's lots of others that give allusion to those, but these ones directly reference creation or the flood. It's only 1 or 2, right? How many are there? 10, 20, 30, 40.
Can you email that to us?
You can take a picture of it. I found that that's the fastest way. But yeah, I could.
Okay, oh yeah, we'll
Yeah.
take a picture.
Yeah. You want to just take a picture? Go ahead. The more I go to conferences and stuff, I just see people that just stand up, click, and take it with them.
Well, it's 12 in each column, so that'd be 48.
Oh, there's even
One
more.
column.
Thank you for counting. I forgot. Yeah, come right over. Walk right in front of me. That's all right. We need some beauty in the screen. 48 texts.
49 counting Revelation.
The number keeps going up. Now, I want to take you and show you a few of these. Would that be all right?
No, Pastor, it's a multiple of 7. It's a perfection
Yeah,
number.
there you go. I'd like to show you some, because it's my belief that you can't really be a Bible-believing Christian and believe in evolution. Because, well, let me show you some people. Okay, so let's take a look at this one. This is Nehemiah 9:6. I'm just going to read the part that's in purple. You alone are the Lord. You made heaven and earth. Did Nehemiah believe God created the heavens and the earth? He sure did. The heaven of heavens with all their host, that's the stars. The earth and everything on it, that includes you, me, and all the animals, and the rocks. The seas and all that's in them. That includes the whales, Leviathan, all of them. Okay, here's another one. Psalms 29, the Lord sat enthroned at the flood. The flood isn't some make-believe good story with a nice lesson. It's not. It's an account of something that happened on earth. Look at this one. By the word of the Lord were the heavens made, and the host of them by the breath of his mouth. Well, that's pretty bold, huh? He spoke them into existence? Really? Oh, hey, that's just what Genesis says, isn't it? Look at this one over here. This is Psalms 136. To him who by wisdom made the heavens, to him who laid out the earth above the waters. Remember I was telling you about aquifers under the ground? If you just look at Genesis, you get a lot of information. But when you start reading the rest of the book, you start realizing that, man, the whole Bible believed that God was the creator. For thus says the Lord, who created the heavens, who is God, who formed the earth and made it, who has established it, who did not create it in vain, who formed it to be inhabited. I am the Lord, and there is no other. Here we are, talking about Noah. For as I have sworn that the waters of Noah would no longer cover the earth. That's in Isaiah. Isaiah was a creationist. He also believed in the flood. Over here, we have just a picture. I want you just to think of an ark with all the living creatures of earth in it, except for the ocean creatures. Okay? The ocean creatures, there's ways that they could have survived the flood. It would have been a tough go. Probably some miraculous intervention. But I love thinking about the flood. Here they are all coming off at the end of the flood. You're going to have to believe in something pretty miraculous to believe in the flood. Oh, but then you're going to have to believe in something pretty miraculous to believe in the creation. But then, isn't it true that we need a pretty miraculous God? If he's not miraculous, then he's not worth believing in. I think the whole point is he is miraculous. And in fact, the creation is one of the things that leads us to trust in him. Look at this one in Matthew chapter 24. But as in the days of Noah were, so will also be the coming of the Son of Man. Here we are in Matthew, and you know who's speaking? That's Jesus. Most of Matthew 24 is Jesus' words. He's saying, Jesus is a creationist. He believes that he created the world. How long? Well, here he's talking about Noah, but we'll come up to across when he created it. Okay, here's something just interesting, just to put in the back of your head. Did you know that 265 separate cultural accounts are out there in the world, 265 different ones, that involve a God, a flood, and the death of most humans? These are cultures that this was something that was passed down from parents to child over generations and generations. 265 of them. The Bible's not the only book that declares that there was a flood in the past. Look at this. All things were made through him, and without him nothing was made that was made. That's John. He's telling us who Jesus is. He says that Jesus is the creator who came to earth and created our world. Here's another one. God, that's who he is, made from one blood every nation of men. So we didn't come from monkeys, we came from one blood. Speaking of the little man that God made, he had a name, Adam. One blood. You and I are all closely related. We're brothers, we're sisters. Literally, genetically, we are related closely. And I love the way people around the world in Christ were unified. Because Jesus reminds us that we all came from the same place. Here's another one, Romans chapter 1. For since the creation, Paul was a creationist. Wait till you hear the one he wrote in Colossians. And since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made. Do you know what that's saying? It's saying if you go out there and you study nature, you're going to learn about God. If you keep reading, it says that even the power of the Godhead, his eternal power, you can see it in nature. You know, it's interesting. When I first became a pastor, people were asking me about my background. It says, you're a scientist? You know, graduate degrees in science, and you're going to be a pastor? They were thinking that those are opposite ends of the spectrum. But you know what? As a pastor, I study God's first book, the Bible. And as a scientist, I study God's second book, nature. And you know what I see? When you bring them together as the Bible describes how they came to be as they are, it makes perfect sense. Here's another one. This is Colossians. Paul speaking. For by him all things were created that are in heaven and that are on the earth, visible and invisible. The him is Jesus. Previous verses nail it. He's talking about Jesus. All things have been created. We're not done. Literally, how many did we say there were? 49? For the creation was subject to futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it in hope, because the creation itself also will be delivered. That's good news. That means that God's going to back up all the effects of sin and all the animals and plants. The original creation, we're going to get to see it again. We're not going to have to deal with lions that have fangs and claws. We're not going to have to deal with serpents that have poison. We're going to have friendly, loving creatures around us, and they're all going to eat grass. That's in Isaiah. For we know that the whole creation groans and labors with birth pains together until now. Yeah, not just humans are suffering. All creation is suffering. You see, what I love about the Bible is that it has an uncanny way of describing our world today. It has a prophecy section that tells us where we would be, written thousands of years ago, yet it tells us exactly where we be right here, right now, 2019 in North America, in the United States. It gives us that detail. How could it possibly have such clarity? Oh, there's an answer for that, isn't it? What's the answer? That book is not a dead history book. That book is living and powerful. Sharper than any two-edged sword. Hebrews 4:12. And that book tells us where we are today. Not only does it tell us where we are today, it tells us where we're headed. It warns us about what's coming. It warns us about the predicament that we're in. But I'm starting to preach. So you're going to realize that I have a legitimate pastoral bent to me because I love to talk about Jesus Christ. And I love to take the Bible and open it like a science textbook and find truth. For by him, Jesus, all things were created that are in heaven and that are on earth. Jesus is the creator, visible and invisible. I like that invisible one because I think of things like gravity and the magnetosphere. Jesus created that. I mean, we wonder what he was doing on day one. It seems like all he did is create light. Well, he had a lot more going on than just light. He was creating all these things. And then I think of invisible angels. Yeah, he created those too. The angels are created beings, aren't they? And then I wonder what else is out there. All that dark matter in our universe. 90% of the matter in our universe is dark matter. It's invisible to us. God made that too, and I wonder what it is. I wonder what's out there. Do you ever wonder what's out there? Here's a look at our Creator, who's also our Redeemer. Peter gives us he pulls the curtain back a little bit, and he shows us a little bit about today. This whole section, it's a warning, and boy, does it create a clear picture of what's going on. All things continue as they were from the beginning. This is the scoffers who are like, you guys, there's no God. We're just evolving. Just like we've been doing from the very beginning. Get over God and learn how to evolve. But Peter puts this in, for this they willfully forget that by the word of God the heavens were of old. In other words, God created the heavens. And the earth standing out of water and in the water. Now that's interesting. It's reminding us that God is the creator. You may try to make your own life, you may try to explain how we got here with your own logic, but Peter reminds us, no, don't forget, we were made. And the one who made us, has a right. More than a right. He's God, and God is love. And because he's God and God is love, he is unable not to do what he can to save us. To be true to himself, he must reach out and redeem us. To be true to himself, he can't let his creation go down to destruction. He's the one that created it. And he is the one that will redeem it. Here we are in Revelation. You are worthy, O Lord, to receive glory and honor, power and praise. For you created all things. The angel who I saw standing in the sea and on the land raised his hand up to heaven and swore by him who lives forever, who created heaven and earth, the things that are in it, the earth and the things that are in it, and the sea and the things that are in it. The Bible cover to cover is repeating over and over again the truth of God's creation. There's one place that many Christians agree was written by the finger of God. What was it? 10 Commandments. Written on stone. That's a pretty, set in place. I mean, if you write on paper, it could deteriorate, rot, burn, crumple, fade. But when you write in stone, it tends to last a while. And I think that's intentional. Written by God's own hand, so it's his words. God himself. And look at what he says here. He says, for in 6 days the Lord made heavens and earth, the sea, and all that is in them. In the 10 Commandments, God reminds us that he's our creator. And that he did it in 6 days. Not 6,000 years, not gaps. In 6 days he made the heavens and the earth. Which commandment is this? It's the 4th commandment. It's the Sabbath commandment. He says, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Why? Why the Sabbath day? Why pick that one? He says, for 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. In it you shall do no work, you nor your son, nor your daughter, your male servant, nor your maid. It's the longest commandment. It goes through all this. No one is to work. Look at this world. Work away at this world. Everybody is to remember that in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that's in them. He made this place. And what did he do on day 7? Isn't that interesting? He works for 6 days. He makes the most amazing creature right at the end of that 6th day. In the afternoon, he makes Adam. And then he really gets it on and he makes Eve. And then he puts down everything. And as the sun is setting on planet Earth, day 7, God says it is very good. And he sits down. God sits down on the grass and he spends the next 24 hours with his precious creation. You see where God's priority is. Creation was a way to build something beautiful and amazing and wonderful for the children that he was going to create on the afternoon of day 6. And his point was, he's going to be with them. Do you realize that's the theme of Scriptures? The theme of the whole Scripture is God wanting to be with his creatures, his kids, us. And when we get snatched away by deception, the rest of the Bible is the explanation of how God is going to get us back and bring us home. It's what God can't wait to happen. I want to go to one more place that you find in the Bible a mention of God as creator. And this is really, really important. It's in Revelation. In fact, in Revelation 14, this is something called the 3 angels' messages. Angels, angelos, that's Greek, means messenger. The first angel comes to the earth. John says, I saw another angel flying in the midst of heaven. The idea is that the angel didn't even come and land, but was hovering above the earth. Because he had a message so important that all the earth hear, that he doesn't even land. He starts speaking his message. And the message, look what it is. It's the everlasting gospel. It's the gospel, the good news that's always been. You want to find out what the good news is? This angel is going to declare it in just a moment. The angel is hovering with the everlasting gospel. And that everlasting gospel, look at this, goes to every nation, tribe, tongue, and people. God wants everyone to hear this message. No one's left out. No one's sidetracked. No one's put to the back. It's a message for everyone. And what's the message? Fear God. Let's not rush it here. Let's just take this piece by piece. Fear God. What does that mean? Be afraid of God? Go hide in a cave? No. It means respect Him. Respect God. How much of our world respects God? Not much. Most of the world has said that's old-fashioned stuff, and they've rejected it. They're living for other priorities. They are ignoring the call of God on their life. They're treating Christianity and God as a past, has-been, old world, ancient tradition. And they don't realize that the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. The first call of this angel is, guys, on earth, make sure you're right with God. Because if you're not, it's going to go very poorly for you. Fear God and give Him glory. Why? Because the hour of His judgment is come. The whole Bible teaches that at some point we all will answer for our choices. Every one of us will stand and answer for what we've done with the life given us. Every one of us at some point will have to give an account of what we did, what we chose. And so the angel is saying, pay attention, turn, give God the respect He has. Give Him the respect, because the judgment is coming. Keep reading though, and worship Him who, what's next? Isn't that something? The final message given to planet Earth, a message of warning that time's up. And whatever choice you have made is going to stand either to deliver you with the blood of Christ or to condemn you into eternal loss. And it's all based on God's made us. What's interesting, we just read the Ten Commandments, right? I'm going to back this up. Look at this. Made the heavens and the earth. Made heaven and earth. The sea and all. This is incredible. This angel, down at the end of time, is highlighting something that we were told way back at the Ten Commandments. What's the Sabbath commandment about? It's about respecting God as our creator. God, at the end of all his creation, and I'm telling you, he could have had a day 7 creation. He could have come up with some more stuff. But what was important to God was made. And so he wanted to spend time with Adam and Eve. And when we ignore God as the creator, we're setting ourselves up for eternal death. That's heavy. And yet it's beautiful. Because you're here and we're talking about God as our creator, which is the best news ever. Best news ever. I've really appreciated you coming and listening to me. I feel like I have dumped about 2 or 3 tons of information on you. I hope it was valuable. I want to tell you about something else that's coming down, though. I'm not done. I've just done the science component of something that you're going to want to get in on. Give you a couple weeks off, but I'm going to do another seminar. Not far from now. And I've got some invitation cards to hand out to you. Feel free to take 1 for yourself and 2 for your neighbors and 4 for your pastor and your friends. You know, evolution has kind of taken things by storm. And there's lots of lies that have been covered over with a little science-ese, you know, big words and stuff. And it has fooled much of the world. Much of the world thinks that evolution's a fact. It's not. Well, evolution isn't the only thing where people have been deceived. I hate to admit it, but Christianity, not just once, but many times, has taught things that really dishonor God. This Bible that we have, it's largely a shelf item. There are more Bibles in the world, let alone electronic Bibles, than ever you could imagine. And yet the Bible is read less and less and less as time goes on. What I would like to do, I'd like to present what the Bible calls us as people to do. What makes this world that we live in come into focus? Let me give you a preview of the first night. It's going to be on October 14th. Okay, so you have a few weeks to rest up and get your ears cleaned out from all this. The first night I'm going to be talking about the fight between good and evil. The fight between God and Satan. Where did Satan come from? Anybody? He was an angel. Not just any angel. He was a covering cherub. He was one of the angels that stood right next to the throne of God. The other angel is Gabriel. Stalwart Gabriel. Awesome Gabriel. The guy who got to go tell Mary she was pregnant. How'd you like that job? You're pregnant. No, Mary was like, I'm the handmaid of the Lord, right? Gabriel. But this one was Lucifer. Lucifer means son of the morning, means glowing. And the Bible tells us about Lucifer and how Lucifer became that dragon. Lucifer became Satan. I want to teach about how Lucifer fell. God didn't create Satan. God did create Lucifer. Who created Satan? Satan created Satan. We're going to talk about free choice. We're going to. If you thought that I had a lot of scientific evidence, this is what I love to do. Is I love to go through the Bible and just pull the verses and put them side by side, and you see things you never saw before. I've done this series once already, and I had a crowd in Mocksville coming night after night, and they just, one of the things that one of the people said, they said, the Holy Spirit shows up here. I've learned more in these meetings than I've been a Christian for 35 years, and I learned more in these meetings. So I'm giving you an invitation. This has been my love, but not my greatest love. I love to talk about Jesus. And my purpose is to give you a foundation solid to stand on, so that as a Christian, you don't feel attacked by all these side issues. We go right to the heart of God. So, I have these cards. I have a volunteer to hand these out. Would you help me? You help me? Okay. Feel free, take 1, take 5. Just before you start handing them out, I'm just thinking, let's have a word of prayer. Can we do that? I just wonder if we could pray. Lord Jesus, I just want to praise you and thank you for the wealth of information and truth that you've led us through, that we can see that you as our creator, there's lots of evidence around. And Lord, as we think about studying the Bible in this kind of depth, I just ask that your Holy Spirit would guide us, each one of us, to know if this is the place we need to be, to know who we need to go to and bring them here. Lord, let your Holy Spirit have full sway. Let your will be done, I pray. In Jesus' name. Amen.
I need like 3 more.
So as they're handing it out, let me just say this. If you have people in your life that you love and you want to help them see clearly who God is, that's what I'm about. I will answer any question I can. I love hard questions about God. So bring people who need to meet Jesus, and we'll have a great time together. There will be free Bibles, King James Version, New King James Version, I think is what we've got. And there'll be food. There'll be fun. What's not to love? Guys, thank you very much. God bless you all.